Hey, dear restless mind. Tonight, we step into the muddy streets of Paris in October 1245, where the air hangs thick with wood smoke, horse dung, and the sharp tang of tannery waste drifting from the Seine. You stand at the edge of the Latin Quarter, your woolen travelling cloak still damp from 3 days of autumn rain, watching hundreds of young men, some barely sprouting their first whiskers, surge through the narrow alleys between timber-framed houses that lean precariously toward each other. Church bells compete for dominance overhead, while students shout in a dozen different languages, hawkers peddle questionable meat pies, and somewhere a fight has already broken out over a gambling debt. You clutch the letter of introduction from your parish priest, the one that cost your father 2 pigs and promises to smooth your entry into this chaotic world of learning. Though honestly, looking at the bloodied nose of that freshman being dragged past by his seniors, you're starting to wonder if those pigs might have been better spent on armour. So grab your warmest blanket and settle in while we explore what it was really like when teenagers left home to pursue higher learning in the Middle Ages. Spoiler alert, you'll probably catch dysentery before you graduate. Drop a comment with your location and what time you're listening. Are you a night owl in New York or an early riser in Tokyo joining us on this medieval academic adventure? Now close your eyes, take a deep breath, and let's walk together through those university gates where Latin is king, and your bedroom might just be a tavern floor. You've been walking for 8 days to reach Paris, your feet wrapped in leather strips that barely qualify as shoes, blisters forming blisters of their own. At 14, maybe 15 if your mother was honest about your birth year, you're considered perfectly ready for university life. Your entire worldly possessions fit in a single cloth sack. 2 linen shirts, an extra pair of hose, a knife, a wooden bowl and spoon, a wax tablet for notes, and that precious letter of introduction. Oh, and 12 silver pennies sewn into your belt, which represents your family's entire savings and needs to last you at least until Christmas. The first thing that hits you isn't the grandeur of learning, it's the stench. Paris in 1245 hosts nearly 200,000 souls, making it one of Europe's largest cities, and apparently none of them have discovered regular bathing. The streets run with open sewers, pigs root through garbage piles, and the crush of humanity around the university quarter intensifies everything. Students, masters, clerks, prostitutes, merchants, beggars, and thieves all compete for space in the twisted medieval streets south of the Seine. You need to find the English nation, not because you're English, but because you're from somewhere vaguely northern, and that's how the University of Paris divides its students. There are 4 nations here. The French, which ironically includes Spanish, Italian, and Eastern students. The Norman, the Picard, and the English, covering England, Germany, Scandinavia, and basically everywhere else, northern and eastern. Each nation has its own procedures, its own fees, its own student officers, and most importantly, its own protection network. Without joining a nation, you're just another vagrant teenager in a hostile city. The nation system isn't just administrative convenience, it's survival. Your fellow countrymen will vouch for you in disputes, loan you money when you're starving, visit you if you're imprisoned, and ensure you get a proper Christian burial if you die, which given the mortality rates isn't unlikely. They'll also haze you mercilessly for the first year, but that's just character building, right? You find the English nation's gathering spot at a tavern called the 3 Crowns, where a senior student eyes your muddy appearance with practiced disdain. He's maybe 18, wearing a threadbare black robe that marks him as a scholar, and sporting the mandatory tonsure, that peculiar haircut where the crown of the head is shaved to show clerical status. Yes, you'll need one too. By enrolling in university, you technically become a member of the clergy, which grants you certain legal protections, but also means you can't marry, carry obvious weapons, or engage in worldly professions. Though judging by the dice game happening in the corner and the serving wench sitting on another student's lap, some rules are more flexible than others. Name and diocese, the senior barks in Latin. Your village priest spent 3 months drilling basic Latin into your skull, just enough to stumble through this conversation. You respond haltingly, and he scratches your information onto a wax tablet. The enrolment fee is 2 silver pennies, 1 for the nation, one for the beadle who'll formally register you with the university. That's 1/6 of your money gone in 5 minutes, but you're not done spending yet. The senior explains with barely concealed glee about the jocund advent. Essentially, you need to throw a party for your new brothers in the English nation. This involves buying wine, actual wine, not the watered-down swill, paying for a feast and providing gifts to senior students who'll mentor you. There goes another 4 pennies. If you refuse, well, nobody's technically forcing you. You'll just find your life becomes mysteriously difficult, your name forgotten during roll call, your seat at lectures always somehow taken, your belongings occasionally misplaced. The registration process at the university proper occurs the next morning at the church of Saint-Julien-le-Pauvre. You join a line of confused young men, all clutching their letters of introduction like holy relics. The university registrar, a bored-looking cleric who's processed thousands of eager students, barely glances at your letter before demanding another penny for the official matriculation. He assigns you to a master, Master William of Sherwood, who'll oversee your early studies in grammar and logic. Here's something nobody told you back home. There's no campus. The University of Paris is just a collection of masters who rent rooms wherever they can. Church porches, tavern halls, private houses, even street corners when weather permits. Your first lecture tomorrow will be in Master William's rented room above a bakery. You'll sit on straw spread across the floor, trying to understand rapid-fire Latin, while the smell of fresh bread tortures your empty stomach. Before you can attend any lectures, though, you need to sort out where you'll sleep tonight, and tomorrow night, and for the next 4 to 7 years, assuming you survive that long. The seniors from your nation offer helpful suggestions, each involving kickbacks to themselves. There's floor space available in a rooming house near the Petit Pont Bridge, only 6 other students sharing the room, and the landlady only waters the wine a little bit. As darkness falls on your first day as a university student, you curl up on a straw mattress that definitely contains fleas, possibly contains lice, and might contain worse things you don't want to contemplate. Through the thin walls you hear other students arguing in German, someone practicing a Latin declension, and what sounds suspiciously like someone losing their dinner after too much tavern ale. Tomorrow your formal education begins with the trivium, grammar, rhetoric and logic, the foundation of all medieval learning. Welcome to academic life, medieval style. The church bells of Notre Dame crash through your dreams at 4 a.m, followed immediately by the clanging of Saint-Séverin, Saint-Julien, and a dozen other churches, because apparently medieval Paris believes synchronization is for weaklings. Your straw mattress crunches as you roll off it, immediately regretting the movement as October cold slaps your face. The other 6 students in your room are already stirring, cursing in various languages as they pull on their robes in the dark. No candles, too expensive and too dangerous in a room full of straw. You fumble for your clothes, the same ones you wore yesterday and will wear tomorrow and basically every day until they rot off your body. The black robe that marks you as a scholar is already developing that special academic smell, a mixture of unwashed body, mildew and desperation. Over it goes your hood, essential for keeping your newly tonsured head from freezing. That tonsure, by the way, is already growing back unevenly, because the barber who shaved it was drunk and his razor was dull. You look like someone attacked your skull with a butter knife. Breakfast is a luxury you can't afford. Maybe later you'll gnaw on yesterday's bread heel, but right now you need to reach Master William's lecture room before the good spots fill up. Through the pre-dawn darkness, you navigate the Latin Quarter's maze of streets, following the sound of other students trudging to their own masters. A few carry lanterns, casting wild shadows on the timber-framed buildings. Most, like you, simply trust their feet to find the familiar path. Master William's room sits above a bakery on the Rue de Foire, literally Straw Street, named for all the straw students sit on during lectures. You climb the external wooden stairs, each step creaking ominously, and squeeze into a room designed for maybe 20 people, but currently holding 35. The lucky ones have spots near the window where dawn light will eventually arrive. You're wedged between a German who apparently believes bathing weakens the constitution, and a Norman who keeps picking his scabs. The straw on the floor hasn't been changed in weeks. It's compressed into a kind of organic cement riddled with fleas and mysterious stains. You arrange your robe to provide maximum padding and pull out your most valuable possessions, your wax tablet and stylus. Books. You don't own books. Books cost more than houses. Master William owns exactly 3 books, chained to his lectern like prisoners. Priscian's Institutiones Grammaticae, Aristotle's Categories, and a commentary on Porphyry's Isagoge. That's it. That's your library. Master William enters, and everyone struggles to their feet. Proper respect must be shown even if your legs are already numb. He's perhaps 40. Ancient by medieval standards, wearing a fur-lined robe that marks his status and wealth. His voice, trained by years of shouting over student chatter, fills the room without effort. Lectio begins, literally reading. Master William opens Priscian and starts reading aloud in Latin. Not translating, not explaining yet, just reading. Word by word, sentence by sentence, while you frantically scratch notes on your wax tablet, trying to capture the essentials before running out of space. When your tablet fills, you'll have to smooth it over and start again, losing everything you just wrote. The wealthy students have purchased parchment, actual parchment, but at a penny per sheet you'd rather eat. The Latin washes over you like a linguistic tsunami. Your village priest taught you basic Latin. Enough to stumble through prayers and simple texts, but this is different. Master William speaks in the refined Latin of ancient grammarians, every sentence a labyrinth of subordinate clauses, ablative absolutes and subjunctive moods. Half the words are Greek borrowings you've never heard. The German next to you is muttering under his breath, trying to translate into his native tongue. The Norman has given up and appears to be sleeping with his eyes open. After an hour of straight reading, Master William begins the glossing, explaining what he just read. Except his explanations require explanations. He references other authorities you haven't read, quotes Arabic commentators whose names you can't pronounce, and occasionally breaks into rapid dialectical arguments with himself. Your wax tablet is a mess of half-formed notes, abbreviated words and desperate diagrams trying to capture logical relationships. Who can explain the difference between substance and accident? Master William suddenly demands. 35 students suddenly find the floor fascinating. He points at you, of course he does, and you stand, your mind racing through the fragments you remember from yesterday's lecture. You stammer out something about how substance is what a thing is, while accident is its changeable properties. Master William nods slowly, then spends 10 minutes explaining why you're completely wrong, but also partially right, but also missing the essential point that would be obvious if you'd properly understood Aristotle's theory of categories. This is your introduction to the trivium, grammar, rhetoric, and logic, the 3 foundational arts that every medieval student must master. Grammar isn't just about conjugating verbs, it's about understanding the deep structure of language itself, why words mean what they mean, how Latin reveals the true nature of reality. You'll spend 2 years just on grammar, memorizing Priscian until you can recite whole chapters in your sleep. Rhetoric comes next, teaching you to argue, persuade, and ornament your speech with classical flourishes. You'll study Cicero, or rather Master William's commentary on someone else's commentary on Cicero, learning the 5 parts of rhetoric: invention, arrangement, style, memory, and delivery. The memory part is crucial because you don't have books to reference. Everything must be committed to your brain storage, organised through elaborate mnemonic techniques involving imaginary palaces and symbolic images. Logic, dialectic, is where things get seriously twisted. Based on Aristotle's works, filtered through Boethius's translations and Arabic commentaries, you learn to construct syllogisms, identify fallacies, and engage in the formal disputations that dominate university life. All men are mortal, Socrates is a man, therefore Socrates is mortal. Simple enough. But wait until you're passing modal logic, where you debate whether something that's possibly necessary is necessarily possible. After 3 hours of morning lecture, there's a brief break. You rush to the nearest tavern where they're serving scholars' portions, basically whatever's left over from yesterday, heated up and sold cheap. 2 farthings gets you a bowl of something that might be pea soup or might be dishwater with aspirations. You wolf it down anyway because afternoon lectures start soon. The afternoon session focuses on questions. Master William poses philosophical problems, and students must argue different positions. Today's question: whether universals exist in reality or only in the mind. This seemingly abstract question has been tearing the university apart for decades. The realists claim universal categories like humanity or redness have real existence. The nominalists say they're just mental concepts. Get on the wrong side of this debate with the wrong master, and your academic career is over. You're assigned to argue the realist position, which is unfortunate because you're not entirely sure you understand what universals are. You stand, clear your throat, and begin constructing your argument in formulaic Latin phrases. I respond that it must be said. To the first objection, I answer, this is proved thus. The structure is rigid, almost mathematical. Premise, minor premise, conclusion. Objection, counter-objection, resolution. Another student rises to oppose you, and suddenly you're in a verbal sword fight, parrying his syllogisms with your own, trying to spot the logical weakness that will let you deliver the killing blow. Master William watches like a referee at a gladiatorial match, occasionally interjecting to point out that you've just committed the fallacy of equivocation or that your opponent has confused correlation with causation. By late afternoon, your brain feels like it's been put through a wine press. 6 hours of intense Latin, complex philosophical arguments and rapid-fire note-taking have left you dizzy. But you're not done. After lectures end, you gather with other students for repetition, going over the day's material, trying to fill in the gaps in your notes, arguing about what Master William really meant when he made that cryptic comment about the nature of being. As darkness falls, you huddle around a single candle with 3 other students, pooling your resources to afford this luxury. One student managed to copy a full page from Master William's Aristotle during a break. Technically illegal, but everyone does it. You spend an hour transcribing his copy onto your own precious piece of parchment, the one you've been saving for truly essential information. Your handwriting is atrocious, cramped into tiny letters to save space, abbreviated almost beyond recognition. This is your education. No textbooks, no libraries, no quiet study rooms, just endless hours of listening, memorizing, arguing, and copying. The quadrivium, arithmetic, geometry, astronomy, and music still awaits you after you master the trivium. Then theology or law or medicine if you're truly ambitious. 7 years minimum for a master's degree, 14 for a doctorate. Your stomach growls as you prepare for sleep, tomorrow's lecture's already looming. The German student is snoring like a sawmill, and someone down the hall is drunkenly singing a Latin hymn with deeply inappropriate revised lyrics. The Norman with the scab-picking habit hasn't returned to your room for 3 days, and nobody's particularly concerned except the landlady who wants his rent. Turns out he pawned his winter cloak for food money, caught a chill, and is now dying of fever in some charitable hospital. His straw mattress space is already claimed by a new arrival from Scotland, who pays an extra farthing for the privilege of not sleeping directly next to the chamber pot. Your own financial situation grows more desperate by the day. Those 12 silver pennies seemed like a fortune back home, but Paris devours money like the mouth of hell. Rent is 2 pennies a month for your slice of floor, highway robbery, but try finding cheaper within walking distance of lectures. Food, when you can afford it, runs another penny per week if you're creative about defining food. Your shoes disintegrated last week, and while going barefoot is technically possible, October in Paris isn't getting any warmer. The fortunate students live in colleges, specialised housing establishments that are part dormitory, part prison, part charitable institution. The Collège de Sorbonne, founded just recently by Robert de Sorbonne, houses theology students in what passes for luxury. Actual beds, 2 students per bed, but still. Regular meals, thin gruel is still technically a meal. And a library, 5 whole books. Getting into a college requires either connections, exceptional brilliance, or the kind of poverty that makes yours look like wealth. You have none of these qualifications. Most students, like you, rent whatever they can afford. The lucky ones share rooms in houses owned by university-approved landlords who theoretically charge fair rates and maintain decent conditions. The word theoretically is doing a lot of heavy lifting in that sentence. Your landlady, Madame Gillette, runs a 3-story timber house that probably violates several laws of physics by remaining upright. Each floor contains 4 rooms, each room contains 6 to 8 students, and the entire structure sways noticeably in strong winds. Your room's amenities include straw, bring your own, a single window, parchment covered, not glass, glass is for aristocrats, and proximity to a latrine, 1 floor down, shared by 40 people. The walls are wattle and daub, which means mud and straw mixed with what you prefer not to identify, covered with a thin coat of lime that flakes off and gets in everything. When it rains, water finds creative paths through the roof, walls and floor simultaneously. Heat is a theoretical concept. There's a communal fireplace on the ground floor where Madame Gillette occasionally burns whatever wood she can acquire cheaply, which usually means wet green timber that produces more smoke than heat. Students cluster around it like moths, holding out numb fingers, trying to absorb enough warmth to last the climb back to their freezing rooms. One Spanish student claims it's colder inside than outside, and honestly, he might be right. Your wardrobe has evolved from minimal to desperate. The black academic robe is mandatory. Without it, you're not recognised as a student and lose all university privileges. Beneath it, you wear your one remaining shirt, patched so many times it's more thread than original fabric. Your hose have holes that you've tried to darn with wool stolen from a merchant's cart. God will forgive you probably. Your brays, medieval underwear, are unspeakable. The Scottish newcomer owns a fur-lined cloak marking him as either wealthy or excellent at theft. You eye it with deep envy every night, calculating whether you could steal it and blame the German. But student justice is swift and brutal. Get caught stealing from your roommates, and best case scenario is a beating that leaves you unable to attend lectures for a week. Worst case is expulsion from your nation and the university, which means losing clerical immunity and becoming fair game for city authorities. Food occupies approximately 90% of your waking thoughts. Breakfast remains a fantasy. Lunch might be a heel of black bread made from rye, barley, and whatever else the baker had lying around, including a non-zero amount of sawdust. On good days, you supplement this with small beer from the tavern, watered down until it barely qualifies as alcoholic but at least safer than Paris water. The university theoretically regulates food prices in the Latin Quarter. Tavern keepers must offer scholars' portions at fixed rates. In practice, this means they serve you the parts of animals that even medieval peasants question. Today's lunch special is umbles, the internal organs of deer, the word that will eventually become humble pie. You paid a farthing for a bowl of something grey and quivering, seasoned with enough pepper to hide the taste of incipient rot. Some students hunt to supplement their diet. Not in the king's forests, obviously, that's a hanging offence. But Paris has rats, lots of rats. A few engineering-minded German students have developed elaborate trap systems, and roasted rat doesn't taste that different from rabbit if you're hungry enough and squint while eating. The Scottish newcomer claims they eat worse things in Aberdeen, though he won't specify what. Begging is always an option, technically forbidden but widely practiced. You position yourself outside churches, displaying your tonsure prominently, holding a wooden bowl while reciting Latin prayers loud enough for passing merchants to hear. The key is looking pathetic but not diseased, scholarly but not well fed. On a good day, you might collect enough to buy actual meat. On a bad day, city guards chase you off for unlicensed begging. Better is finding work, though university regulations severely limit your options. You can't engage in mechanical trades, no working with your hands like a common labourer. But you can copy documents for lawyers, tutor rich merchants' sons in basic Latin, or serve as a clerk for church administration. The Scottish student makes decent money writing love letters for illiterate nobles, though this requires creativity since every letter essentially says, "Your eyes are like stars, your hair like gold, please sleep with me," in fancier words. You found work carrying messages between masters, earning a farthing here and there. It's degrading. You're basically an errand boy. But it keeps you in bread. Sometimes masters tip extra if you deliver particularly urgent news, like warning them that university authorities are coming to check if they're actually teaching, or just reading the same lectures they've used for 20 years. Your current employer, Master Peter of Limoges, pays you to wake him for morning lectures. This involves banging on his door at dawn while he curses your entire lineage in impressively creative Latin. He lives in an actual house with an actual bed and an actual fireplace, luxuries that seem as distant as the moon. His servant occasionally takes pity and gives you leftover bread, though leftover is relative when describing week-old crusts. Clothing acquisition becomes an art form. When a student dies, which happens with depressing regularity, his belongings are theoretically sent home to his family. In practice, roommates conduct rapid redistribution of useful items before authorities arrive. The German student wears boots that definitely belong to the Norman with scabs before his fatal fever. You're eyeing his spare shirt, currently hidden under his straw, waiting for him to drink himself unconscious so you can negotiate a trade. The college students occasionally organise charity for their poorer brothers. Charity means they throw feast scraps out their windows while laughing at the scramble below. You've learned to position yourself strategically, catching half-eaten capons and partial loaves before they hit the mud. Pride is a luxury you can't afford when your stomach is eating itself. Washing happens when absolutely necessary, which is approximately never. The Seine is right there, but it's also where tanners dump their chemicals, butchers throw their offal, and the entire city empties its chamber pots. Public bathhouses exist but cost money, and have unfortunate reputations as brothels. Your last proper wash was in September, when unexpected rain caught you outside and you figured you might as well scrub while wet. Lice are your constant companions. Everyone has them, students, masters, probably even the king. You've named yours after classical authors. Virgil lives behind your left ear, Cicero prefers your armpit, and an entire colony of Aristotles has established itself in your groin. The Scottish student claims he brought special Highland lice that are fighting a territorial war with the French varieties. He's joking, probably. Disease stalks the student quarter like a hungry wolf. Every winter, some form of flux sweeps through, emptying bowels and dormitories with equal efficiency. The German student survived the sweating sickness last year, but lost 2 toes to frostbite. The Scottish newcomer mentions casually that 3 students in his previous lodging died of something involving pustules and fever. You all just nod and shift slightly away from each other on your straw. Your current funds, 3 farthings and a badly clipped penny that merchants eye suspiciously. Rent is due in 5 days. Your stomach hasn't seen actual meat in a week. Master William announces that Lent disputations begin next week, and your stomach drops faster than a heretic through a trap door. You've been at the university for 2 years now. 2 years of grinding through Priscian's grammar, memorising Aristotle's categories, and slowly understanding that education here is less about reading books and more about intellectual combat performed for public entertainment. The disputation hall is actually the refectory of the Franciscan monastery, rented because it's one of the few spaces large enough to hold the crowd that academic bloodsport attracts. You've watched dozens of these battles, seen confident students reduced to stammering wrecks by master logicians who dissect arguments with surgical precision. Now it's your turn to enter the arena, and you'd rather fight an actual bear. Your examination for the baccalaureate begins with determination, a week-long series of debates where you must defend philosophical positions against anyone who shows up to attack them. The positions are assigned randomly, pulled from a hat like lots for execution. You draw whether the soul of a dog is fundamentally different from the soul of a man. Fantastic. You'll be arguing that yes, they're different, while some smug Parisian who's never seen a dog outside of manuscript illustrations tries to prove universal soul equality. Preparation consumes every waking moment. The Scottish student who survived his own determination last year shares his secret. Memorise stock arguments for every possible objection. If they invoke Aristotle's de anima, counter with Augustine's distinction between rational and sensitive souls. If they bring up Arabian philosophers, claim their texts are corrupted in translation. It's not about truth. It's about not running out of responses before time expires. The morning of your first disputation, you haven't slept in 36 hours. Your brain is a fevered mixture of syllogisms, authorities, and barely suppressed panic. You wear your best robe, meaning the one with fewer visible holes, and attempt to look scholarly rather than terrorized. The German student offers you his breakfast bread, but you're too nauseated to eat. The Scottish one suggests wine for courage. You compromise on small beer that immediately wants to come back up. The hall is packed. Students love watching examinations the way Romans loved watching gladiators. They've placed bets on how long you'll last, whether you'll cry, and if you'll commit any amusing logical fallacies. Masters sit in judgment at the high table, wearing their formal regalia, looking like well-fed vultures waiting for you to intellectually die. The proctor reads your thesis in sonorous Latin. It is determined and affirmed that the souls of brute animals, lacking reason and will, are essentially distinct from the rational soul of man, which alone bears the image of God. You stand at the respondent's podium, a rickety wooden structure that wobbles when you grip it for support. Your opponent, a third-year student from the Norman nation, rises to attack. "I argue contra," he declares, launching into a prepared assault. If the soul is the form of the body, as Aristotle states, and if dogs possess bodies capable of sensation, emotion and memory, then their souls must participate in the same essential nature as human souls, differing only in degree, not kind. Your mouth is desert dry as you respond. I answer that the objector confuses accidental properties with essential nature. A dog may possess sensation, but sensation without reason is mere mechanical response. The rational soul possesses intellect and will, which are not simply enhanced versions of animal faculties, but entirely different categories of being. Back and forth it goes, each exchange more complex than the last. He invokes Avicenna's theory of emanation. You counter with Aquinas' distinction between material and immaterial cognition. He quotes obscure passages from Pseudo-Dionysius. You claim he's misinterpreting the Greek. The audience follows like spectators at a tennis match, occasionally cheering a particularly clever riposte or groaning at an obvious logical stumble. 2 hours in, your legs shake from standing. The Norman switches tactics, trying to trap you in a reductio ad absurdum. If animal souls are fundamentally different, then there must be an infinite hierarchy of souls. Souls for dogs, cats, horses, flies. This multiplication violates the principle of parsimony. You're ready for this one, having anticipated it during your sleepless preparation. The objector creates a false dichotomy. I maintain not infinite types, but two fundamental categories, rational and non-rational. Within non-rational souls there are degrees of perfection, the soul of a dog more perfect than that of a worm, but all share the essential characteristic of lacking intellect proper. By hour 3, you're operating on pure adrenaline and muscle memory. Words flow without conscious thought, citations appear from nowhere, and you're vaguely aware that you just used a subjunctive construction that would make Priscian proud. The Norman is flagging too, recycling earlier arguments, hoping you won't notice. Master William finally raises his hand. Sufficient. The respondent has adequately defended his position. Not a ringing endorsement, but you haven't failed. 1 disputation down, 4 more to go. Each subsequent debate blurs together into a haze of Latin, logic, and exhaustion. You defend the position that celestial bodies influence, but don't determine human behaviour. You argue that monarchy is the most natural form of government. You maintain that time is a measure of motion rather than an independent reality. By the final disputation, you are essentially sleepwalking, responding to objections with memorized formulas while your conscious mind floats somewhere near the ceiling. Survival isn't triumph, but it's enough. After a week of intellectual torture, the masters convene to determine your fate. You stand before them, swaying slightly, as they deliver their judgment in formulaic Latin. You've met the requirements. You're now a baccalaureus, a bachelor, entitled to wear a special cap and assist masters in teaching younger students. The actual ceremony involves kneeling while Master William taps your head with a book, Aristotle's Logic naturally, and declares you sufficiently instructed in the trivium to instruct others. Your new status comes with privileges and obligations. You can now give cursory lectures, basically reading texts aloud to first-year students, while the real masters do important things like drink wine and argue about universals. You're also eligible to begin studying for the license to teach, the licenza docendi, which requires 3 more years and examinations that make determination look like friendly conversation. The path to master's degree stretches ahead like a particularly ambitious pilgrimage. First, you must complete the quadrivium: arithmetic, geometry, astronomy, and music. Not practical mathematics, mind you, but the philosophical significance of numbers, the mystical properties of geometric forms, the influence of planetary spheres on sublunary existence, and the mathematical ratios that govern musical harmony and, by extension, the universe itself. The German student is attempting his inception for the master's degree, a ceremonial disputation that makes your bachelor's examination look like children's games. He must defend a thesis before the entire university, and any master or student can challenge him. It's scheduled for next month, and he's already developed a nervous twitch and started talking to himself in syllogisms. If he survives inception, there's the formal investment ceremony. New masters receive a beretta, a square cap with a pom-pom that looks ridiculous but represents serious academic achievement, a gold ring, usually brass but everyone pretends, and a book, which they immediately sell to pay debts. They swear oaths to uphold university statutes, not reveal trade secrets of logic to the uninitiated, and continue residing in Paris for at least 2 years to teach. The real prize is the doctorate, requiring at least 7 years of additional study in theology, law, or medicine. Doctoral examinations are public spectacles lasting entire days. The candidate must respond to any question on any topic within their field, from any challenger, in perfect Latin, while maintaining logical consistency throughout. One theology student last year was asked to explain how many angels could dance on the head of a pin. He spent 4 hours constructing an argument about the relationship between spiritual substance and physical space that left everyone confused but impressed. The Scottish student tells you about his cousin who's pursuing a medical doctorate at Montpellier. 8 years of memorising Galen, dissecting pigs because human corpses are forbidden, and learning to cast horoscopes to determine the best time for bloodletting. He says the final examination includes diagnosing diseases from urine samples, colour, smell, taste, and astrological considerations. You've considered switching to law, better career prospects and less Latin poetry to memorise. But law students spend 7 years memorising Justinian's code and learning to argue that black is white if a client pays enough. The examinations supposedly include defending obviously guilty clients using only procedural technicalities and rhetorical misdirection. For now, though, you're a bachelor, one step up from intellectual peasantry. Your immediate concern is that teaching obligations pay almost nothing, and you still need to attend your own advanced lectures while somehow finding time to drill grammatical constructions into the heads of 14-year-olds who'd rather be anywhere else. The celebratory feast for new bachelors consists of bread that's only moderately stale and wine that's only moderately vinegar. You toast your achievement with the other survivors, trying not to think about the years of examination still ahead. The Scottish student starts a drinking song in Latin about the romantic availability of theology students. The German continues muttering syllogisms. Tomorrow you begin preparing for the next level of academic purgatory, but tonight you're officially educated enough to teach others. God help them. The screaming starts around midnight, which is actually late for a Tuesday. You recognise the war cry of the Norman nation mixing with what sounds like the Picards, defending their tavern territory, and somewhere in the chaos, metal is definitely meeting skull. Through your window, torches bob through the street like drunken fireflies as the fight spreads from the Tavern of the Two Swords to the entire Rue Saint-Jacques. The Scottish student doesn't even wake up anymore. Student riots are background noise like church bells or dying cats. Violence at the University of Paris isn't occasional, it's scheduled. There's market day violence, students versus merchants over prices, Saints' Day violence, different nations celebrating their patron saints by beating up other nations, and random Tuesday violence because someone looked at someone wrong in Latin. You carry a knife, theoretically for eating but practically for not dying. The German student has a proper dagger hidden under his robe, which is completely illegal and completely normal. The university regulations strictly forbid weapons, gambling, visiting prostitutes, staying out past curfew, missing prayers, wearing fancy clothes, speaking vernacular in lectures, keeping pets, playing music loudly, throwing things from windows, and approximately 300 other activities that constitute 90% of student life. The statutes fill 3 massive volumes that nobody has read completely, including the masters who enforce them randomly and capriciously. Last week you witnessed the university court in action. A student from the French nation had stabbed a Picard over a dice game. Just a little stabbing, barely penetrating the lung. University justice is swift. The attacker was formally expelled, which lasted exactly until his nation paid a fine, and he promised to save 50 paternosters. The victim, meanwhile, was fined for gambling. University logic is special. The proctors, essentially university police, patrol the Latin Quarter with the effectiveness of blind men hunting mice in the dark. They carry wooden staffs and the authority to arrest students for statute violations, but they're outnumbered roughly 50 to 1 and know it. Their main strategy involves showing up after violence has concluded to fine whoever's still conscious. Your first real fight happens in November. You're walking back from a late disputation when 3 townies, Parisians who aren't students, block your path. Another parasite clerk once spits, using the local term for students that manages to be both accurate and insulting. They want money you don't have, so they settle for entertainment. The beating is almost professional, enough to hurt and humiliate, but not enough to permanently maim. They know that killing a student brings university wrath, but roughing one up is practically a civic duty. You limp back to your lodging, blood dripping from your nose, ribs singing symphonies of pain. The German student nods sympathetically and shares his wine. Could be worse, he says. Last year they threw a Burgundian in the Seine. He couldn't swim. This is comfort, medieval university style. The relationship between town and gown, Parisians and scholars, is essentially organised hatred with occasional truces for commerce. Townspeople resent students for their legal privileges, their arrogance, their poverty that doesn't stop them from acting superior, and their annoying habit of speaking Latin to exclude locals from conversations. Students despise townspeople for price gouging, violence, and their failure to appreciate the finer points of Aristotelian logic. Every few years, this mutual antagonism explodes into proper riots. The German student was here for the riot of 1229, triggered when some students couldn't pay their tavern bill. The innkeeper called the city watch. The watch beat the students called their nations. The nations mobilised hundreds of armed scholars, and by morning several people were dead, and the university went on strike for 2 years. Just stopped teaching, examinations, everything, until the king himself intervened. Drinking is the fuel that powers most violence. Every nation has its tavern, every tavern has its wine, and every wine leads to someone questioning someone else's interpretation of Porphyry's tree. Academic arguments that begin with, "I respectfully suggest your position lacks logical foundation," end with broken furniture and missing teeth. You've learned to recognise the danger signs. When Germans start singing martial songs, when Normans begin comparing ancestry, when English students exist in groups larger than 3. The tavern brawl you're currently watching from your window has reached the stage where furniture becomes projectile. A bench flies through the air with surprising grace before connecting with someone's head. The city watch has arrived, which means the violence will now become mobile as students scatter through the twisted streets, playing cat and mouse with authorities who know the Latin Quarter far worse than the scholars who inhabit it. University punishment for violence follows a sliding scale based on who you are and who you hurt. Strike a fellow student, small fine, strike a master, suspension and public humiliation. Strike a university official, expulsion and possible excommunication. Strike a townie, well, did anyone see you do it? Can you get 3 members of your nation to swear you were at prayers? Then it never happened. The Chancellor of the university holds his own court, complete with its own prison, really just a cellar under the Châtelet where they chain students until their nations pay their fines. You visited the German student there once, bringing him bread and news from lectures. The cell was dark, wet, and contained 3 students, 2 rats of unusual size, and a bucket that hadn't been emptied in recent memory. He was released after 2 days and a fine that consumed his food budget for a month. More serious crimes go before the bishop's court, where students' clerical status provides protection from secular justice. A student who murders a townsperson faces church punishment, penance, pilgrimage, maybe temporary excommunication. A townsperson who murders a student faces hanging. This asymmetry drives parishioners insane, and students leverage it shamelessly. The Scottish student has a sideline business writing threatening letters for other students. I, a clerk in minor orders, protected by benefit of clergy, do hereby demand satisfaction. The letters are legally meaningless but intimidating to illiterate merchants who know that students operate under different rules. He charges a penny per letter. 2, if you want impressive-looking seals. Prostitution thrives around the university despite official prohibition. The bishop's ladies, prostitutes licensed by the Bishop of Paris. Because medieval economics is weird. Patrol the Latin Quarter, offering temporary companionship to lonely scholars. University statutes forbid students from visiting brothels, keeping mistresses, or engaging in carnal knowledge, but enforcement is essentially non-existent unless you're caught in flagrante during a lecture. The German student maintains what he calls a spiritual friendship with a baker's daughter that involves extensive midnight theology discussions in her father's storeroom. The Scottish one simply pays for professional companionship and considers it an educational expense. You can't afford either luxury and sublimate your frustrations into increasingly aggressive Latin poetry about the mystical properties of grammatical gender. Gambling is the other great student vice, banned and omnipresent. Dice games run continuously in taverns, street corners, even church porches. The stakes range from farthings to entire academic careers. One theology student allegedly wagered his doctorate thesis and lost, forcing him to defend a position he knew was heretical. He failed, obviously, but the story grows with each retelling. Your own gambling is limited to watching others lose. The German student has a system involving numerical patterns that consistently fails. The Scottish one prefers cards, a newer innovation that allows for more creative cheating. You've learned to recognise marked cards, weighted dice, and the 17 different ways someone can palm a coin. This knowledge is more practical than anything Aristotle taught. As dawn approaches, the street fight has ended with typical inconclusiveness. Windows are broken, heads are blooded, but nobody's dead, which counts as a peaceful resolution. Tomorrow the proctors will issue fines that won't be paid, the university will threaten punishments that won't be enforced, and the townspeople will raise prices in revenge, continuing the cycle that's persisted since the university's founding. The Scottish student finally wakes up, surveys the damage visible from the window, and makes a profound observation. Bit quiet for a Tuesday? He's right. Last Tuesday featured fire. You pull your knife from under your straw, can't be too careful after a riot, and try to catch an hour of sleep before morning lectures. Your ribs still hurt from last week's beating, your stomach is empty, and you're fairly certain the German student is planning something inadvisable involving the French nation and a borrowed pig. This is university life, where intellectual enlightenment comes with a side of random violence, where you're simultaneously a protected clerk and a target for anyone with a grievance against students, where learning Latin is less useful than learning to run through dark alleys while drunk. The candle has burned low now, dear restless mind, and our journey through medieval university life draws to its close. Your breathing has grown deeper as we've wandered these ancient streets together, dodged the flying furniture of student riots, and survived the intellectual combat of disputations. The stones of Paris grow quiet in your imagination, the Latin chants fade to whispers, and those young scholars we've followed settle into their straw beds for another night of dreams, punctuated by church bells and the occasional brawl. Let the sounds of the medieval city soften into the gentle rhythm of your own heartbeat. The cramped rooms and cold halls dissolve into the warmth of your modern bed. Those hungry students, those endless lectures, those violent streets, they're all sleeping now in history's embrace, and you can join them in rest. Release the tension of examinations never taken, forget the Latin you never had to memorize, and let grateful thoughts for your own education carry you into peaceful darkness. The university bells are silent now. The disputations are finished. Even the tavern brawls have ended. All that remains is the soft whisper of time itself, carrying you away from medieval Paris and into dreams where knowledge comes easier, where bread is plentiful, and where nobody makes you argue about the souls of dogs in a dead language. Sleep finds you at last, scholarly and safe, as the last echoes of those ancient stones fade completely into the sweetest of academic achievements. Uninterrupted rest. Close your eyes. Let go of consciousness with the same relief as those bachelor students completing their final disputation, and drift into dreams unmarked by Latin grammar or Aristotelian logic. The medieval university releases you from its demanding embrace. Sweet dreams, gentle scholar, sweet dreams. End of script. Sweet dreams.